The humid air of New Orleans in the early 1900s was thick with mystery, whispers, and the clamor of the unknown. But in 1918, the streets became fraught with terror as the city faced a killer unlike any it had known before, the infamous Axeman of New Orleans. His reign of terror would leave a permanent scar on the city's history, not just because of his brutal murders, but also because of the eerie, almost supernatural aura that surrounded his crimes. It all began on May 23, 1918, with Joseph and Catherine Maggio, an Italian grocer and his wife, who were found bludgeoned to death in their home. The attack was vicious. Both had their throats slit with a straight razor before being struck in the head with an axe, a tool that became the Axeman's calling card. The gruesome crime scene offered little in terms of leads, but one thing became clear. This was no robbery, no ordinary crime of passion. The murder weapon was left behind, as it would be in future attacks, and nothing was stolen. News of the murders spread quickly, and soon panic began to set in. A killer was loose in the streets of New Orleans, creeping into homes undetected, taking lives in a way that seemed methodical, yet unpredictable. His modus operandi became his signature, breaking into homes, often through a chiseled panel in the door, attacking his victims in their beds with their own axes or knives, and vanishing without a trace. In a city where jazz music filled the air, the Axeman's reign of terror began to play out like a macabre dance with death. Over the next several months, a series of brutal attacks would follow. The killer struck again on June 27, 1918, when Louis Bessumer and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, were found in the back of Bessumer's grocery store. They had both been hacked by the same axe, yet they survived the attack, only to be shrouded in a web of rumors and suspicion. The police, desperate for answers, arrested Bessumer, suspecting him of being involved in the crime. However, the lack of solid evidence and the recurrence of similar attacks forced them to reconsider. The Axeman was still out there. On August 5, 1918, the killer claimed his next victim, Anna Schneider, a young woman who was 8 months pregnant. She was found by her husband, bleeding profusely from her head. Yet, miraculously, both she and her unborn child survived. By this time, the city was gripped with fear, unable to predict where or when the Axeman would strike next. The police were powerless to stop him, and the public began to speculate about who, or what, this killer might be. Was he a deranged psychopath, a vengeful spirit, or perhaps a demon, as some locals whispered in hushed tones? What truly set the Axeman apart from other killers of his time, however, was his chilling correspondence with the people of New Orleans. On March 13, 1919, a letter was sent to the Times-Picayune, a local newspaper. The letter was signed by the Axeman and was filled with both taunts and a bizarre ultimatum. In it, he claimed to be a demon from hell, a servant of Satan sent to harvest souls. But the most unnerving part of the letter was his declaration that he would spare anyone playing jazz music on the night of March 19th. The letter read, "I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe." This strange command turned a city in fear into a city in celebration. On the night of March 19th, 1919, New Orleans transformed into a jazz festival like no other. Every home, bar, and club echoed with the sounds of brass, piano, and the fevered rhythms of jazz. People, desperate to avoid the Axeman's wrath, played music into the night, dancing and drinking to ward off death. Remarkably, no murders occurred that evening. The Axeman had kept his word, or perhaps the entire city had heeded his warning, but the lull in his attacks was temporary. The Axeman returned on August 10, 1919, when he brutally murdered Steve Baca, yet again breaking into a home and attacking without mercy. More killings followed, including the murder of Sarah Lauman, a 19-year-old who was found unconscious with severe head injuries, but miraculously survived. The Axeman's last known victim was Mike Pepitone, a father of 6, who was found dead in his bedroom on October 27, 1919. His wife, who had been asleep beside him, reported seeing a man flee the scene, but could not identify him. This was the final murder attributed to the Axeman, and after that night, he vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. The police never found the Axeman. Despite interrogating numerous suspects and following countless leads, his identity remained a mystery. Some believed he was a deranged serial killer, while others thought his crimes were connected to the mafia, targeting Italian immigrants in the city. Others still believed in the supernatural explanation, the demon from hell, as he had claimed in his letter. Whatever the truth, the Axeman slipped through the fingers of justice, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions. Today, the legend of the Axeman of New Orleans continues to haunt the city. His crimes remain unsolved, and his eerie letter still sends chills down the spine of anyone who reads it. The Axeman is forever intertwined with the history of New Orleans, a spectral figure lurking in the city's past, a reminder of a time when fear ruled the streets, and jazz music was not just entertainment, but salvation. The legacy of the Axeman lingers in the dark corners of New Orleans, where jazz still plays, and the specter of his unsolved crimes casts a long shadow over the city that he once terrorized. On the cold, quiet evening of February 9, 2004, a young nursing student named Maura Murray disappeared on a rural road in the small town of Haverhill, New Hampshire. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance are shrouded in mystery, filled with cryptic clues, eerie behavior, and a puzzling timeline that has haunted investigators and true crime enthusiasts for nearly 2 decades. To this day, her case remains one of the most baffling and enduring unsolved mysteries in modern American history. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. By all accounts, she was a bright and promising young woman. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, her behavior suggested something was troubling her deeply. Maura's personal life was in turmoil, which some believe could hold the key to her vanishing. There were reports of relationship issues with her long-distance boyfriend, Bill Rausch, who was stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, as well as academic and legal troubles. Just a few days before she disappeared, Maura had been caught using a stolen credit card to buy food, an uncharacteristic action for the typically responsible student. The day of her disappearance began like any other. Maura emailed her professors and work supervisor, informing them that she was taking time off due to a family emergency. But there was no such emergency. She then packed up her car, a 1996 black Saturn, with clothing, toiletries, and personal belongings, including some of her favorite items, suggesting she might be planning to leave for an extended period. Oddly, she left behind her textbooks, which seemed out of character for someone as diligent as Maura. At around 7:30 p.m., Maura's car veered off the road and crashed into a snowbank on Route 112 near the small town of Woodsville. A local resident, a bus driver named Butch Atwood, saw the accident and stopped to offer help. Maura, who appeared shaken but uninjured, declined assistance, assuring Atwood that she had already called for roadside assistance. However, there were no cell phone signals in the remote area, so it was unlikely she had made such a call. Concerned, Atwood returned to his home nearby and phoned the police. What happened next is one of the most chilling aspects of the case. When police arrived on the scene just minutes later, Maura was gone. Her car remained, its windshield cracked, and the airbags deployed. Inside the vehicle, investigators found her packed belongings, a bottle of wine, and a printed map of New Hampshire. There were also empty beer cans and a box of wine that had leaked onto the car's interior. It was clear Maura had been drinking, but the extent of her intoxication is still debated. Despite extensive searches of the surrounding area by police, search and rescue teams, and even volunteers, there was no sign of Maura. She had seemingly vanished into thin air in the frigid New Hampshire wilderness. The initial theory was that Maura had wandered into the woods in a state of shock or intoxication and succumbed to the freezing temperatures. However, after exhaustive searches, no evidence of her was ever found, not a single footprint, piece of clothing, or personal item. In the days following her disappearance, several strange details came to light. First, there was the discovery of a rag stuffed inside the tailpipe of Maura's car, a detail that has puzzled investigators ever since. Some have speculated that Maura, possibly under stress or confusion, may have placed it there herself, perhaps in an attempt to sabotage her own vehicle. Others believe it was an indicator of foul play, suggesting someone else had tampered with her car. Then there were the cryptic emails and phone calls. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Maura had been in contact with her boyfriend, Bill Rausch. According to him, their last conversation was strange and emotional, with Maura sounding upset but refusing to explain what was bothering her. On the day of her disappearance, she had also emailed her professors about the fabricated family emergency, a detail that further adds to the mystery of her intentions. Was Maura planning to run away, or was she simply taking a break to clear her head? One of the most perplexing aspects of the case is the sighting of a person who might have been Maura. A few days after the crash, a couple reported seeing a young woman, fitting Maura's description, walking along Route 112, about 5 miles from the accident site. However, this lead never resulted in any concrete findings, and the woman's identity remains unknown. Was it Maura, or simply a look-alike? Theories about what happened to Maura Murray have abounded in the years since her disappearance. Some believe she staged her own vanishing, hoping to start a new life, free from the pressures and troubles that had been weighing her down. There are accounts of people who had a history of such behavior, disappearing and reinventing themselves in a new location. Could Maura have done the same? Others believe Maura was the victim of foul play. The area where she disappeared is remote, but not completely desolate, and some locals speculate that Maura may have encountered a dangerous individual after her crash. This theory is bolstered by the fact that there was a window of just a few minutes between the time Butch Atwood saw Maura and when the police arrived, leaving little time for her to have wandered far on foot. One chilling possibility is that Maura fell victim to an opportunistic killer. There have been reports over the years of suspicious individuals in the area, and some have pointed to other unsolved murders and disappearances in nearby regions that could be linked to her case. However, no solid evidence has ever emerged to support this theory. In the years since Maura's disappearance, her family has remained relentless in their search for answers. Maura's father, Fred Murray, has been especially vocal, criticizing law enforcement for what he believes was a mishandled investigation in the crucial early hours and days after Maura went missing. He has personally organized searches, hired private investigators, and appeared on numerous media outlets, to keep the case in the public eye. Despite extensive media coverage, including episodes on Dateline, 2020ths, and Disappeared, as well as countless online discussions and true crime podcasts, Maura Murray's case remains unsolved. It is a case that continues to fascinate and terrify in equal measure, a stark reminder of how someone can vanish without a trace, leaving behind only questions. Maura's disappearance stands as one of the most enigmatic missing persons cases in modern history, and though nearly 2 decades have passed, the haunting question remains: what happened to Maura Murray that cold February night? Perhaps someday the truth will emerge, but until then, her case lingers, an unsolved mystery that refuses to fade away. In 1947, Los Angeles was a city of dreams and glamour, where Hollywood stars glittered and the allure of fame pulled countless hopefuls to the city's sun-soaked streets. But the City of Angels was also a place of dark secrets and hidden dangers. The most chilling reminder of this was the infamous Black Dahlia Murder, a case that would leave an indelible scar on the city's history. Elizabeth Short, a young woman aspiring to become an actress, would be forever immortalized, not for her talent or beauty, but for her gruesome and unsolved murder. Our story follows a journalist named Jack Halloway, a hard-nosed reporter working for the Los Angeles Herald-Express. Jack was well-versed in the city's darkest corners, but no case had ever captured his imagination like that of Elizabeth Short's murder. Like many others, he was fascinated by the mystery of the Black Dahlia. How could someone so young and beautiful be so violently taken from the world? And how had her killer escaped justice? The question plagued him for years, long after the case went cold. It was early 1953 when Jack found himself diving back into the murky waters of the Black Dahlia case. The story had resurfaced in the news, as anniversaries of famous crimes tend to do. But for Jack, it was more than a passing curiosity. Something about the case haunted him, and he felt that the real story had never been told. The photographs of Elizabeth Short's mutilated body, cut cleanly in half, her face slashed with a grim Glasgow smile, were forever seared into his mind. The press had fed on the grisly details, sensationalizing her life and death. But Jack wanted to know more. Who was she really, and why had she been murdered in such a brutal way? Jack's editor had long grown tired of the Black Dahlia. "Let it go, Jack. The story's been beaten to death. No pun intended," he'd say. But Jack couldn't let it go. He began digging through old police reports, witness statements, and newspaper articles. The further he dove, the more he realized how convoluted the investigation had been. Hundreds of suspects had been interviewed, some of them prominent figures in Hollywood, and yet the case had been mishandled at every turn. Then, Jack stumbled upon a name he hadn't seen in the public files. A doctor, Dr. George Hodel, a once-respected physician with connections to the city's elite. Hodel had been questioned by the police in 1950 after his own son turned him in, suspecting that his father might have been involved in the Black Dahlia case. There was something about Hodel's story that disturbed Jack deeply. Hodel was a known predator, with accusations of sexual abuse levied against him by his own daughter. His dark, sadistic nature seemed to line up with the brutal way Elizabeth Short had been killed. Despite Jack's increasing obsession, Hodel had never been charged in connection with the murder. There were whispers about Hodel's ties to influential people in the LAPD, and even rumors that some officers had been paid to look the other way. The deeper Jack dug, the more dangerous his investigation became. Unsettling things started happening. His office was ransacked one night, and anonymous threats arrived at his doorstep, warning him to stop asking questions. But Jack had gone too far to turn back now. He managed to track down a retired detective who had worked the case, a grizzled old man named Sam Morrison. They met in a dimly lit bar, far from the prying eyes of the city. Sam was reluctant to talk at first, but after a few drinks, he opened up. "We had him," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible over the clinking glasses. "Hodel. We had him dead to rights, but someone high up shut it down. He was protected. I can't tell you by who, but trust me when I say we were told to drop it." The revelation sent Jack's mind reeling. If the police had truly been ordered to abandon the investigation, it meant there was a cover-up far larger than he could have imagined. He became consumed with the idea of bringing the truth to light, regardless of the consequences. Jack began following Hodel, who was still alive and living comfortably, despite his notorious reputation. He watched the man from afar, trying to gather evidence, but as the days passed, Jack started to notice strange cars parked near his apartment, menacing figures following him wherever he went. He felt a creeping dread settle into his bones, as if the city itself were warning him to back off. One night, Jack returned to his apartment to find it trashed again, but this time, there was something different. On his desk, laid out carefully, were the same crime scene photos of Elizabeth Short that had haunted him for years, but there was one new addition, a photo of himself, taken from across the street. Written in red ink were the chilling words, "Stop digging, or you'll end up just like her." Jack knew he was in over his head. He packed up and fled the city for a while, hoping to escape the shadow that had begun to loom over him. But no matter where he went, the weight of the Black Dahlia case hung over him like a curse. The horror of Elizabeth Short's murder had seeped into his mind, and he realized that solving the case might not even be possible. Too many people had too much to lose if the truth came out. In the end, Jack's obsession consumed him. He returned to Los Angeles, determined to write his final piece on the Black Dahlia. But before he could finish, he vanished without a trace. His apartment was found abandoned, his typewriter sitting mid-sentence, as if he had been interrupted. Some whispered that Hodel had finally silenced him. Others believed that Jack had stumbled upon something so dark that it had driven him mad. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jack Halloway. Just like the Black Dahlia, his case remains a chilling, unsolved mystery, a reminder of how some secrets in Los Angeles are meant to stay buried.